Good afternoon and welcome to the Law and Crime Network. I'm Angelica Spanos. We are following a live trial today out of Florida, and we have been following this all morning long. This is the trial of Scott Nelson as it continues with the penalty phase, which started this morning. So you just heard the charges that Nelson was just faced with. We know that this was first-degree murder, kidnapping, carjacking, and robbery. The penalty phase, as I said, is beginning now. It started this morning. When it starts up again, we will definitely take you there live. Before we get to all of this, I want to introduce our guest today, Gene Rossi, Law and Crime legal analyst. Gene, thanks for being here.
Oh, good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
So before we get into the opening statements from earlier this morning, quickly just talk about this trial in general. You know, it was very rare that we heard him on the stand, Nelson himself, and to top it all off, he basically confessed to everything.
Well, I think it was a good move because the evidence was overwhelming, number one. It was a horrific murder. And number two, they're not waiting until the penalty phase to say he did it. He took the stand, he admitted responsibility, even though it was horrific, he admitted responsibility, and he is obviously hoping that the sentencing jury, if you will, is going to cut him some slack because during the guilt phase, he bit the bullet and said, I did it, I have basically no excuses.
Right. All right. Well, earlier today, the prosecution started their opening statements. Let's play you some of those. That was the beginning of the prosecution's opening statements from earlier this morning. Gene, he kept mentioning the aggravating factors. You know, he talked about how he killed Jennifer Fulford so she wouldn't be able to testify against him. He mentioned, like I said, the aggravating factors repeatedly. What's he trying to prove here? Why do that?
Well, beyond a reasonable doubt, if the aggravating factors outweigh the mitigating, then the jury can find him eligible for the death penalty. And he did a great job just being sort of a professor here, nothing dramatic, nothing emotional. He's just laying out what the evidence was in the guilt phase, using the defendant's own words. I think the biggest aggravating factor for me is not only was he on probation for a robbery, a violent crime, but he admitted on a stand he took Jennifer Fulford's life because she was going to testify against him in another criminal case. And you throw in a pecuniary gain, those are powerful, just powerful aggravating factors.
Right, and he goes on to talk about also how it was premeditated, which is another thing he touches on. So let's listen to that from earlier this morning. So he continues to touch on the other aggravating factors here, Gene. He basically lays them all out in a list and goes through each one and talks about each one. What'd you think of that? And like you said, I think he did a good job. Like, he does it very professionally and very almost like he's teaching us.
Oh, I got to tell you, I love this guy. Please tell the viewers his name. I think he's terrific. He's not overly dramatic. He's not pointing at the defendant. I think he's referring to the defendant as Mr. Nelson. But what's beautiful is he talks about the law, the OR versus AND. You know, cruel or heinous. Doesn't have to be both. It's cruel or heinous. Cold and calculating and premeditated. He is just laying it out there. And I got to tell you, the jury's probably paying attention with rapt interest. And the last thing is no notes, no PowerPoint, old school.
Yeah, okay, just to answer your question, his name is Assistant State Attorney Ken Nunnally. So that's who he is. Remember that. What else can we expect to hear? So obviously this is the prosecution, but what is the defense going to do in their opening statements? We, of course, will play you those, but what can we expect?
Well, I'm not being too facetious. One, I would pray. And two, it's Angelica, it's like poker. Their hand is so bad. I'm looking forward to the closing or opening by the defense, because all I would argue, this is all you could argue, is members of the jury, this is cold and calculated, cruel and heinous. We're not going to dispute this. But our client got on the stand. He admitted everything. He admitted his motive. and please sentence him to life. He is never going to see the outside of a prison. He's never going to have a chance to murder anybody again. I would just say life is enough and not death. That's all you can do.
Right. All right. Well, we will wait and see what happens. We have to take a break. Stay with us here on the Law and Crime Network. Plenty more on Scott Nelson's trial when we come back.